Welcome to the Making of Me podcast, where we explore the defining moments that shape extraordinary people into who they've become. Today's guest is Dr. Irvine Nugent, a leadership expert, keynote speaker, and the co-founder of Conflict EQ, a framework helping leaders stay grounded, clear, and constructive under pressure. He grew up in Northern Ireland during the conflict, a place where what goes unaddressed really stays contained, and that formative experience shaped everything he would eventually comes to understand about how human beings handle tension, guidance, and the capacity to stay effective when everything around them is under pressure. It's really a pleasure and honor to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Dr. Evan, take us back to growing up in the Northern Ireland during the conflict. What what was daily life like, and what did as a child absorb for living inside a society where unresolved tension were a permanent backdrop?
Yeah. So for those that aren't aware, back in the late 1960s, a tension that had been going on for hundreds of years boiled over into violence. And so my generation is called a child of the Troubles. So I was born in 1967, just when they began. And so my memory of childhood is this is always in the background. So daily life was, you would go shopping and you were going to a store and your bags were searched because there may be bombs.
Yeah,
You would have to avoid areas because there might be shootings. And so, this was just a daily reality. And so I think, you adjust to that. You're a child, and my parents were wonderful. They provided a beautiful home. And so despite the tension
yeah,
outside, when I came home, it was a very loving environment, and they did their best to surround me with love, etc. And they did. But I think I've only begun to appreciate as I've got older the
yeah.
enormity of that and how that influenced growing up, etc.
Growing up in that particular society filled with tension, with the whole of backdrop of violence and it a lot. And also growing up in that particular environment teach you about conflict that most people never have to learn, about how to go and address faster, how silence can become a dangerous confrontation, and how community pay for what leaders refuse to face out. What were the specific lessons that landed most deeply into you?
Yeah, I think first of all, for me, the lesson was conflict is dangerous.
Mm,
So conflict divides societies. I mean, literally, Northern Ireland was tribal. It had two opposing sides. Each had their history. Each had their story of what was happening. And so I grew up fearful of conflict. I grew up
mm,
thinking that, if I say the wrong thing, I'm in the
yeah,
wrong place. It is dangerous. And I think that impacted me to the sense of I avoided conflict. So conflict
mm,
was to be avoided. And I think one of the lessons coming out of that was how it impacted my adult life, the beginning of my adult life. I like to say, a conflict coward. I did not want to go
yeah,
anywhere near conflict. Conflict was to be avoided. Let's make peace. Let's be friends. So this was the motivation within me. It's only later that I realized, oh, that's not very helpful. That's not a
yeah,
great way of addressing conflict. And Northern Ireland, thankfully, is in a different place today, and it's in a different place because conversations begun to happen, that people were able to have conversations, and that has opened a door to the situation. There's still tension there. There's
yeah.
still some division, but thankfully there's not the violence that was around when I was there.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. And thank you so much for sharing. And also later on you eventually became a CEO, and one of your best people walked into your office and said, I quit out. What
Mm.
happened when you asked him why, and what did its answer cost you to hear?
Yeah. So that, I think, for me was the moment when I realized the weight of what my childhood had borne upon me
Mm,
as an adult. So I thought I was CEO of an organization. I actually thought I was doing a great job.
yeah,
I was compassionate. I was trying to create a great culture, etc. And one day one of the best employees walked into my office and he said, "I quit." And I was kind of mystified. I was like, where is this coming from? And I asked him why. And his answer to me was, "I am tired of working in organizations which refuse to deal with difficult conversations and difficult issues." And I think that hit me hard because in many
Yeah.
ways, what you you as a leader are not providing a space. And I think it begun a little light within me. It, for the first time, I think in my adult life, I realized the impact of growing up in Northern Ireland and it had cost me. And my fear was irrational. And that if I was to be effective as a leader, as a human being, that this was something I needed to change. And so it kind of began within me this impetus, this urge to change my relationship with conflict.
Yeah, such a moment in the back and front having to kind of make you see the deep in the into your growing up, having to avoid conflict, getting to kind of affect how you lead in the particular organization. And eventually, you eventually understood what you were not, that you were not avoiding conflict because you did not care, but because you did not have the capacity to handle it well. That's the difference between those two things. Why does that distinction matter so much?
Yeah, I think it's important because, first of all, very often we avoid conflict for good reasons. I know I avoid a conflict because I want to remain friends with this person. I don't want to disturb the friendship, or I don't want to cause unnecessary anxiety, or will this conversation really have a benefit? So we avoid it for good reasons. The problem is if you keep avoiding a conversation, you just delay it.
Yeah,
It's going to happen, and the tension gets worse. And I think the insight I had was, what I got curious. Why can I have great conversations with people? Like I'm having a wonderful conversation with you. What is it that happens to me whenever there's tension, whenever we talk about something tense? And what I like to say is, it's not all of a sudden that we've lost our art of
yeah,
conversation. What it is that we've lost the capacity in this moment of tension. We've become defensive. In this moment of tension, we've personalized what we feel, and
mm,
we don't have access to all the capacity we normally have in a beautiful conversation.
yeah,
And so I think the problem is, conflict is not going away. Conflict is the most natural thing for two human beings to experience. But what we have to be able to do is to access the ability to be curious and thoughtful in that moment of
yeah,
tension, in that moment where it becomes uncomfortable. Because at times as human beings, we don't like to be in tension. We don't like
yeah.
to feel uncomfortable. And so part of the art of becoming better in conflict is to be able to sit with the tension just a little longer so that we can be more thoughtful in what we say.
Yeah, yeah, stay in the conflict for a bit longer and be very thoughtful in what we get to say. It's really a whole lot in here. And just speak volumes to the fact that, yeah, every good life is going to be based on, there's going to be conflict one point or the other, but you are having to sit with it rather than avoiding it
Yes.
and taking it through and seeing better way to actually more like getting to settle it other than avoiding it, sweeping it under the carpet, which doesn't do anything, but just cost it to build up. It's a lot of. So that moment I sent you on a journey out, first out of necessity, and then as a calling out. What did you start studying? And what did that combination of live experience and formal research review that you could not have access through it out them alone?
So I think it started two parallel journeys. I think the first journey was inside.
Yeah,
And I think any good leader, any good human being begins a journey of self-awareness. So, I mean, your podcast is about, thinking about childhood, thinking
yeah,
about the past, thinking about events. And this is all self-reflection. So it's all about
mm,
what is it that's happened in my life that has impacted me to today. And then how do I show up? What are some of the things that trigger me? Why is it that I feel uncomfortable? These are all great questions which need some inner work, some inner reflection. So I think the first part of the journey is know yourself, get to know your habits, get to know how you show up. And then I think the second was the research that I did. So I actually was involved in a doctoral program, and my research was on CEOs and how they dealt with issues of transparency and accountability. How were they accountable?
Yeah.
And that research showed me is, first of all, I'm not alone. That a
Yeah.
lot of CEOs avoid conflict like the plague. They don't like it. They don't like highly emotionally charged events. They find it difficult to sit. And so the research then brought me to really some deep research on emotions and how we as human beings experience emotions, how those emotions impact us. And then also done some research itself on conflict and what is it about conflict? Why do we think
Yeah.
it is so dangerous? Why do we avoid it? And maybe looking at some ways of this term which we've come across with capacity. How do I increase the human capacity? Because I think one of the things that's important, conflict, I've said this before, is normal. And what is conflict? Conflict's really about difference. So the two of us meet, you meet another person, we have different backgrounds, different stories, we have different values, we have different loves and passions. All of that is difference. And that difference sometimes can impact us and cause friction. And that friction is the beginning of conflict. So it's the most normal thing. And we don't want it anywhere else
Yeah.
because boring would life be if we were all the same, if we all thought the
Yeah.
same and etc. But because we don't, then you have a little bit of that friction, and that friction can cause conflict. And that's healthy. It's wonderful, but it's also can get us into trouble. And that's what we
Yeah.
have to
Manage
kind
it.
of have the dividing line there. Yeah.
Yeah. This is really amazing, especially just the point out conflict as different. So into we have different background, we have different perspective, we have different way we view life, and a conflict is more of the frictions in between it. And yeah, those they do it's painful now. Owing to our frictions get to be until it's become leveled up and we're able to understand what each person's perceive and being able to come in terms. And that the fact that
Yeah.
yeah, conflict is normal. And I think the moment when you get to realize that other CU are passing through, that will give you a bit of relief. I say, I'm not the only one in this other side of it. I thought,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And when you think about it, you take any conflict in a family,
yeah,
in a business, anything in the world, into, you know, when you break it down and you look like what does this person value? What does that person value? And really it's coming down to differences which have never really been talked about. We personalize and instead of really talking about
mm,
what has got us there. And I think, that's the clue to being able to explore, if there's one superpower that every human being needs when it comes to conflict is curiosity. Am I truly curious
curious.
about the other person? I mean, this podcast is all about exploring story and exploring the background. If we could bring that energy into all our conversations, think how much better the world would
Yeah,
be
it's
if
too
we
true.
were truly curious about what made this person, how did they arrive where they're at? And to really come from a notion of curiosity, it just, it's impossible to be angry and curious at the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
time.
so true, so
And,
true.
and, and, and it's so beautiful to bring that sense of curiosity. It really helps us to expand
Yeah,
our insight into another person and to see them not just as the one person that's doing
yeah,
this, but actually they're much bigger than this one thing I disagree with them.
yeah, so true. And I think the moment you just make reference to it, I just remember some friends of mine that over time I didn't get to like them before because of one thing or the other I saw in them. And just having to hear their story at one point, I'm like, I was able to extend the hands of forgiveness, which I think I'm wrong in here. I didn't know that you have to go through all of that, and you're just acting off owing to the fact that it was just a way of protecting yourself, owing to the trauma and owing to a whole lot of things he has gone through. I'm like, I didn't know any of that. I thought that
Yeah,
it
you
was,
begin yeah, you begin to appreciate,
yeah,
and it's so funny, whenever we are put on the defensive, when we feel tension,
yeah,
everything begins to narrow. Our
yeah,
emotions narrow, our story narrows. And so if I'm in conflict with another person, I'm in conflict with one story I have. This
yeah,
person did
yeah,
that. And because this person did that, this means this about this person. And being curious and expands that, well, yes, this may be true about this person, but this is also true, and that's also true, and this is
yeah,
also true, and this is also true. And then, oh, okay, I can put this in a little context now,
yeah,
and that gives me a little space to reevaluate what do I really feel about that person.
Yeah, so true. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And also, you co-founded the Conflicts EQ and have built a body of work around helping leaders develop that capacity. What has that work taught you about the human being that your own experience and your academic study has not fully prepared you for?
I think it is that conflict is so pervasive. Conflict is so much part of our lives, and we spend so much energy and angst thinking about it, thinking what to do, thinking how to afford it, or in it, that it is consuming. And I think I appreciated the fact that conflict is normal, it's around, but I think I'm beginning to understand like how much part it is in our lives and how difficult people find to navigate it. And what's been lovely is helping people, embrace conflict as something normal, give people tools to help them manage it, and how freeing that is both for them and for the people in their lives.
Yeah, amazing. And I think I was talking to a particular guest of mine the other day that some key things when it comes to life they are not being taught. Even when you go to school,
Mm,
a lot of
mm,
courses they are not being taught. The subject of money is not being taught. The subject of relationship is not being taught.
mm.
We are all human beings and millions and billions living in this world. Definitely there's going to be tensions and conflict. But we are not being taught how to resolve it. It just shows that the making things we are just left to figure it out in the dark, and it's really, really a whole lot because you can't expect having to have more like billions of persons in this whole world without getting to be a conflict and going to be some misinterpretation of who you feel the other person is. It's a whole lot.
Yeah. And, it brings this great question about, where do you learn how
Yeah,
to approach conflict? You learn from
yeah,
your family and you learn from the people around you. Now, sometimes we have great parental models, but most of the time we don't. And we don't learn anything in school. And so therefore we're carrying this model we
yeah,
learned in childhood and very often some of the trainings I'll ask people about their conflict story, what happened when you grew up? What did you learn implicitly about conflict? And it's
yeah,
amazing. I learned that you got to push in, you got to defeat the
yeah,
other person, or I learned you got to avoid it, etc. And all of that's happening. And so, yeah, there's a massive need for education, beginning in our school. This is important. This is if education is to expand the mind, education is also about helping us in life and helping us
yeah.
navigate life. And I think these are important life skills that have to be part of education.
Yeah, so true, so true. And thank you so much for sharing. And also from your conflict or EQ that you build up, what does that reframe or change about how a leader should approach the difficult conversation that they have been avoiding?
So conflict EQ is bringing together two things, conflict and emotional
Yeah,
intelligence.
emotional
And so
intelligence.
it's emotional intelligence in the service of conflict. And I think what we're trying to teach leaders to do that it's one thing to have the skills
Yeah,
which help us have good conversations. It's another thing under moments of pressure. Can I actualize these skills? And so what we try and teach with leaders is in moments of pressure, have I the self-awareness to realize what's happening inside? Am I triggered? Am I being defensive? And do I have tools to turn to help me in the midst of that narrowing to make some expansion so that I'm able to be curious, I'm able to be calm, I'm able to ask questions which help the conversation move forward instead of being stuck and help the conversation really get to the outcome that you want. And I think those are the core skills and the core mindsets that we're trying to change.
mm, amazing, amazing. Emotional intelligence in the service of conflict and being able to kind of put out those particular parts to see a better way to actually get to resolve it. And also, you said emotional intelligence often fail our leaders in the exact moment they need it the most. What is actually happening and why does pressure so constantly overwhelm the very skill that people had developed in hard time?
Yeah. So when you think about it, we learn our emotional intelligence skills sometimes in a training course. And in a training
Yeah,
course, it's in a room and it's wonderful and it's great.
yeah,
And then all of a sudden, I go from the training course into a difficult conversation with my colleague, and that's a totally different environment.
yeah,
and all of a sudden we're triggered. And what happens, the beautiful thing about human beings, we're having this conversation today because within us is this ability. Evolution has taught us to survive. And
Yeah.
so we have amazing survival instincts as human beings. And part of those instincts, of course, is when we feel challenged or threatened, that we double down, we focus in on the threat to overcome it. Great to survive, not so helpful in a
Mm.
difficult conversation at work or at home.
Yeah.
And what we have to do is to realize how that impact of that threat upon us, how it's narrowing our emotions, it's narrowing our choices, it's narrowed the story we're telling. And therefore, how do I, in that moment, really bring the emotional intelligence
Mm.
skill so that I can narrow or I can expand that viewpoint and that I can function at a higher level?
Yeah. Great in survival skill, but not that much in conflict.
Mm,
This is really a whole lot, especially the fact that each and every person are focused on their own survival. And sometimes having to sit down and look at 2, 3 steps ahead and saying resolving this, it's quite very intriguing to the fact that that moment you're all catering for what is in for me at this point. Not minding what the other person's position, get to stand and getting to see what the person is going. They are getting to mirror the situation from the person's view. I think that's where it's really a whole lot. And it has to be something we might have to engage over time for we to be able to kind of at least gain a little mastery. A little.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Thank you. And also, you talk about the nice leader, the one who avoid conflicts in the name of keeping the peace up. What does that avoidance eventually cost the team? And why do the leaders who care most sometimes create the most damage through their silence?
Well, we live in a world today where, it's often said, well, leaders should be kind, generous,
Yeah,
empathy is a big thing. Leaders should be empathetic. And all those are true. We absolutely, I want to work for a kind and generous and empathetic person. I don't want to work for a person that's not. However, the important thing there is, first of all, to examine, are there clear boundaries? Just because you show empathy to another person doesn't mean that you're not able to also hold them accountable. And I
yeah,
think this is where there's fuzzy. We've made empathy into something or into something it's not. And that is that it's an invitation to, well, I'll never challenge you, or
yeah,
I'll never hold you accountable, or I'll never have good boundaries. And I think what happens is that what we have to do is empathy also is allowed to exist with clear boundaries. And so I can be empathetic to you. I can understand your story. I can make you feel heard, which is essential,
yeah,
but I can also hold you accountable for something you didn't do, for something that you're doing incorrectly. And I think leaders get, this is where it's important. It's this, the avoidance doesn't eliminate conflict. What it's really doing is it's transferring the cost of that conflict to the future. And you're going to add
yeah,
interest as well. So
yeah.
if you don't solve the problem now, the earlier you can, the better, rather
Mm,
than letting the tension grow and grow and grow, because there will come a time when you are going to have to pay for it.
yeah, avoidance does not actually want to do justice to it. In fact, added interest and interest upon. And I think just viewing this from a financial term just speaks volumes. Added compounded interest to it. And me, just looking back now, it just dawned on me that some of the great leaders I've admired owing to I serve under them as being those who doesn't avoid conflicts as much as they are kind. They call you out anytime you actually breach the boundaries and you didn't do what ought to be done. And they sort out the best, the good in you, the best in you. And bringing it out, the best in you in terms of holding you accountable doesn't come easy. It's conflict. There's a whole lot of back and forth. Having to look back, I'm really grateful they did those things. Why those who doesn't avoid it, I can't really pick points to what
Yeah.
point they really had a great impact.
Yeah.
It just speaks volumes to it seems there is no growth when there is no more like just engaging and tough conversations
Yeah.
compared to just
Yeah. And I think, we've talked a little bit about the negative
yeah,
impact, but there's also very positive. So the positive thing is if I'm able to have this conversation, as tense as it may be, the value of that conversation is we have greater clarity. I may uncover new things about you. I may understand you better. I may understand what drives you, your values. I may understand how to work better with you. A team may uncover more ingenuity and creativity and answers that they hadn't explored before. So all of this is the generative nature of conflict. Conflict can help us understand and enlighten and uncover in a way that we would not have happened if we hadn't had the conversation.
Yeah, this is really amazing. Yeah, you could actually more like generate a whole of database when conflict comes into being that you're able to see what the other party you're not seeing before. I think it's really key making correct decisions compared to you not having those engagement where you lack those data to make correct judgments.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So lastly, what legacy do you hope conflict EQ and your work leave, especially for the leaders who are right now avoiding conversation they know they need to have, and for organizations that are really quietly paying the price for it?
I times I realize that I grew up in a society which had been dealing with conflict for 800 years. And I think that's part of our legacy. And so it placed in my heart that I want to be a person that builds bridges and not walls. And everything I do, I want that to be a person that's building a bridge to other human beings. And I think as leaders, if I can help leaders build bridges and not walls, if I can help leaders have the courage to have conversations they've been avoiding, then I think the legacy I want is that I help people create or encouraged people to create better work environments, better familiar environments. The great thing about this, if you learn to do it at work, you can do it at home, and just, create a little contagion of this, that this conversation we've been avoiding is not going to destroy us. And in fact, it may be a beautiful pathway to new understanding. And let's build a bridge. Let's not continue building walls.
Yeah, this is really amazing. You want to be the person that build the bridge rather than bring the wall. And I think this is really interesting, being that the more you get to build the bridge, you give others permission to build the bridge to it. The more our world get better, owing to the fact that people knows better, they know how to engage better. And having that at home too becomes something that become automated for the children who are around, who get to see it over time that, conflict isn't bad, but we could do better with it, owing to we have larger database compared to those living in conflict and there is no resolution. And what they keep seeing it seems avoidance should be. This is really amazing. And thank you so much for sharing your heart with us on the making of.
Well, thank you for the conversation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. So from all this, we would love to reach out either to get the EQ or to reach out in respect of it, or whether for consultation or to connect with you across various platforms. How can they reach out, and where is the best platform?
Yeah, please feel free to, first of all, the website, conflicteq.com. I'm also very active on LinkedIn, Irvine Nugent, and please feel free to connect with me there. I have content there every day, and also YouTube. I do a lot of videos, and so if you want to explore a little bit more the world of conflict and how to build more bridges than walls, feel free to connect with me. I'd love to continue the conversation with your listeners.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Irvine. Thank you for such a grounded, honest, and genuine, important conversations. Yeah, your journey just remind us that the conflict we grow up inside, whether in the society or a family or an organization, are never just background noise. They shape us, and that the leaders who we have become the deepest work on their own. That we have become the best on their own, are capable of to stay present under pressure, are the ones who finally break the cycles that have been costing them and everyone around them. And from all this, we would love to reach out. Check the show notes. You see the link to our websites, and that of his LinkedIn, so that you can easily engage. Yeah, once again, it's really a pleasure and honor.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.